The first thing that I want to talk about, though, is the good that is coming from this, because I think that today we've concentrated a lot on where we can go with this and how far into the future this kind of idea is. It's kind of scary. And I don't want to really focus on that's important, and I think it's really critical. In fact, I talked to Francis Collins for a few minutes last night, and he said, you know, it's enough to project into the future about where we're going, but there's enough problems right now that we need to talk about, get into dialogue about, and discuss, much less worrying about the problems of the future, which are there too. We need to worry about both sides of it. But first of all, I want to share with you some obvious good technologies that are going on that obviously have lives behind them and faces and pictures. You heard the talk last night. The man who had the 2 children, who had the genetic defect, and I had to get my Kleenex out. That just broke my heart. And one of his comments that really struck home with me was, if there is a cure for this, they need to be able to find it. That gives you just a second to hear the agony of someone who has gone through a genetic disease in their family. Don't you think they feel responsible? It's genetic. It is genetic. I mean, you're responsible for having these children, bringing them into the world. This is traumatic, and this drives researchers. Yes, it drives. There's an industry behind it. There's capitalism. There's all these negative parts, but there's a positive part to wanting to help children who have these illnesses, to make them right. And there have been some wonderful technologies that have come up from this to offer cures in some cases. Now, obviously not in all. Okay, there it is. Ta-da! Aren't we excited? There's the slide I was telling you about. Good. Is it working? You're going to go ahead and manage it from there? Okay, good. Yeah. All right. So here it is right here. I think that's a good way to start off. Let's go to the next slide, and this will give you, this is a great issue. If you're going to talk to anybody about, I want to tell you very quickly, if you can go back to the second slide. It's not on it. Go all the way back. I let a student borrow these slides. This is part of the testimony of this talk. I let a student borrow these slides to give a talk on DNA. This is what it's all about. I gave her, I trusted her with these slides. She dumped the carousel out, came back to me later and said, I don't know, something's wrong. The slides are sticking now. They fell out of the carousel. So as I was working earlier with them, I thought, uh-oh. But you know, that's part of it. That's part of it right there. She was sharing the information she'd heard in a talk that I had given to her fellow students in a public speaking class at our college. And that's what it's all about, is sharing the information. And I think that's part of what the talk is today. This is a great issue of Life magazine, if you can land this one somewhere, April 1995. Did a great spread in a very layman term type way to understand the impact of all of this that we've been talking about. Especially if you take a look at the cover there, you can see it gives the benefits right off the top. It says, knowing your genetic family tree may save your life. And that's part of it. It gives a couple of pictures. If you go to the next one there, we'll see this in the face of this child here. This is Justin Schrader, who has retinoblastoma, which is a childhood cancer, very, very small percentage of children that have this, that affect the retina. The cancer moves to the brain. It can take the child's life. As a result of genetic testing and awareness in the family of this disease, this child had his eye removed. It stopped the spread of cancer to his brain. Now his whole family has been tested accordingly to be able to see if the cancer is in the other children as well. Let's go to the next one. Here's a child. Ashi and Ashanti is her name, De Silva. She was the first child right here catching the soccer ball that got genetic therapy. And if this isn't an incredible story, if you want to talk to her parents, she would have died. She had a disease that is like SCID, the boy in the bubble disease. Her enzyme deficiency led to her immune system not being able to fight disease. It's a very traumatic situation. The girl next to her, this is down back in my hometown in the Woodlands in Houston, where they're playing together. Both of them have benefited from genetic therapies. And I show people these slides, and boy, they're just so excited. They think this is so great. And indeed, in this case, there's no doubt about it, this may be a possibility here, although not all of her cells have converted over, obviously. Okay, next slide. So you can see there that there's some real possibilities there, but I like this one. Here's Art Kaplan saying, but wait a minute, if you can see the title there, knowing the future isn't necessarily beneficial. Now, why would he write a column on this? Knowing the future isn't necessarily beneficial. Now, we've just given you some real positive things that are happening. But why wouldn't people want to know their genetic information? Well, we've already heard it this morning brought to you very wonderfully. There are other people who are interested in this information, number one. Number two, do you want to know right now if you are going to die of a late onset disease? Do you want to know if you have Alzheimer's? Do you want to know if you have breast cancer in your family? Not only do you have it, but as Francis Collins so aptly brought forward, a predisposition. How do we interpret that? That is very, very difficult. And some people, Arlo Guthrie is a perfect example, Woody Guthrie's son. In the face of, I don't care that I have Huntington's disease in my family, I'm getting married, and he had 3 children. Now, he does not exhibit the disease, he's in his 50s now, but that's a perfect example of, I don't want to know, and I'm going to go ahead with my life, because other things can happen to me, like plane accidents, right? Okay, so I'm going to move on with my life. Now, that's one attitude that you can have. So, is knowing the future beneficial? Well, next slide will show you that indeed, there are other individuals who are interested in this information. Some third parties, specifically insurance companies, are very interested in laying into this information. They are a risk analysis type of a company that needs to know those types. Just like your MasterCard has your right to look at your credit background, do they not? And same thing with an insurance company. Shouldn't they be able to look at your genetic history? And I know all of us are going to have reasons that we don't maybe think that's quite right. How about your employer? Heavy-duty risk to bring on somebody who has a genetic illness, the benefits that this person is going to have for you. I'm thinking about, okay, so we find the gene for heart attack, a possible heart attack risk, predisposition to heart attack. Do you want Continental Airlines to hire this person as your pilot? This can be potential employer discrimination, and possibly in a good way. Who knows? It's hard to predict. So employers, schools, school systems. This has been documented back in sickle cell anemia when that was identified. And schools discriminated against individuals. Future spouses. This is like HIV. I want to know what your genetic status is before we get married. I think I need to know that. Who has the right to know this information? So it's raising a number of different questions, and I think as Christians, one of our biggest questions right now is, will there be a class of genetic lepers? Will there be a class of genetic lepers as a result of genetic information? Unless, and I watched Francis Collins the other night with Ted Koppel pushing him on this real hard, and Francis Collins pushing back and saying, you know, it's not the Human Genome Project that's bringing this about. It's the lack of public policy, and we need it now. We need legislation now. But there's a problem with needing the legislation now. We can go to the next slide and find out why. In the 1992 Department of Energy published the following report for the Human Genome Project. An excerpt from this report, and if you can't read this, I'll read it out to you here. While very challenging issues are raised by genome research, solutions are not simple. Defensible rights often exist on both sides of any issue. Further research is needed, as well as, I've got it underlined, activities to promote public awareness and assist in policy development. It wasn't a doubt that the Human Genome Project people who are working so hard know that one of their major goals is to educate the public so that they're not hit with this information and completely unable to determine what to do. But unfortunately, you'll find out that, this is a great book, by the way. I've got this in your handout. You've got it, everybody's got the handout. There's a bunch of them back there in the back chair if you don't have one. It's a great handout. Educators always prepare great handouts because they know you want all the, don't you, you know they're like flipping out books to you real fast and you're like frantically writing them down. I've got it all back there in the handout, and I think it'll really help you. This is a good one, Assessing Genetic Risks, answering a lot of the questions, not answering them, just re-articulating them again. A lot of good answers to, not answers, re-articulation of the questions are in this book here, and I picked out some information from that. Get this, just to let you know, what does the average person know about genetics? In fact, I attended the session yesterday just to see who would come. And it was interesting to see the number of people there who wanted a review on their genetic terms because it's a tough, let me tell you, I was there. I had to go back and educate myself in the area of genetics. Why? Graduated in '82. That was too long ago to get this biology. I had to go back so I could teach it in the classroom. So this gives you an idea that this wasn't taught such a short time ago. But the National Opinion Research Center says in 1991, 85% claimed to have heard or read nothing about genetic screening. 85%. This is 1991. 1992, March of Dimes survey, 68% know little or nothing about genetic testing, 87% know little about genetic therapy. So we've got some tremendous deficits in the amount of information that people have. Certainly we know who's informing them, but they have a very little amount of understanding of what all this is about. And I think part of this talk today is geared on these three types of ideas, that obviously we need to educate, and as Christians we need to hear this message because we need to be in the forefront. We need to educate about basic genetics. We need to have awareness of the issues. They need to be brought forward to people. And lastly, we need to have dialogue for consensus building. There must be dialogue, but people can't dialogue unless they're educated and aware. So dialogue is the critical key, I think, and that's what hopefully we can be about in our churches, in our schools. So there's the formal education. The public schools obviously are responsible for this message. The colleges are responsible for this, as well as informal education. How about the churches? I thought that was so great when Francis, I keep on picking on him, but when Francis Collins raised, when Chuck Colson does a deal on bioethics and genetics, how many, the phone lines are dead. It's like nobody's really as interested as they should be, and it's kind of scary. And I think this is something that we need to worry about, drawing people in some way or another. Of course, I like this next slide, because I think this would be the answer I would have to the problem. Let's go to the next one after this. Not this one. This isn't the answer. That's just DNA. Next one here. This is committed. It says biotech solutions to child care in the future. The teacher is saying, does everyone have their listening ears on? And all the kids have ears like Dumbo. They're like this big. They're just huge, which would be my answer in my biology classroom. I don't know about you, but I would like everybody to have listening ears. But anyway, the interesting part of it is back here, there's one child in the back that looks pretty normal, little bitty ears, and he says, no, I don't have my listening ears on. I just thought that was an interesting slide. Already it's coming through in the cartoons. Okay, I think in our community college, I found that the genetics issue does span the curriculum entirely. Go to the next slide and you'll see that the genetics is across all different areas of the college. There's a number of different types of areas where it can be taught. Obviously biology, chemistry, physics. We saw earlier, Dr. Anderson brought those up on the screen. Physics, chemistry, all of these areas where this can be taught. But I would say probably very importantly that we need to look possessed again. He's holding on to it, ladies and gentlemen. I would say most importantly that we have to realize that this whole discussion spans into the humanities. It spans the entire, it's just an incredibly wide berth that we need to offer. Obviously, you can imagine in my biology classroom, we have a fairly large genetics issue where we do discuss the ethical issues and bring them forward. I'm going to tell you a couple of those things that we do. But obviously, this discussion can span much further than that. You can go into the areas of psychology, and go, obviously, it's already being used in psychology, philosophy, in bioethics. Hopefully every bioethics is going to have a unit on genetics and discuss the implications of this. Most interestingly, English. If any of you want some more information on how to incorporate it into a composition and rhetoric class, we actually taught a course where it combined the two. And students had to write on these very topics. They had to write on them. Now we're doing research in combination with wanting to know more about the issues. And this English professor still uses this to have his argumentation papers. He still uses these topics. So it really is exciting to have in that area. Here's an interesting one too. The next slide, if we can get it up, is the New York Times, themes of the times, a vat of DNA may become the fast computer of the future. Isn't that interesting? DNA is a calculator. So I'm going to take this to my math colleagues and ask them whether or not they're interested in teaching about, here's another place just to bring it up, some of the new technologies far beyond what we think. But this is really interesting, using the binary code and thinking about computers in that way and using the DNA code. So I just thought that was interesting. So it spans across the curriculum. Here is the next slide, is the text that I used for that Bio-English course. We invented that. That was very unusual. The Bio-English course, here's Science and Technology Today, some good writings in that book that we used for that course. Most of the stuff is in your handout, so don't worry about jotting it down. This was a great class to share the issues in a way that, in a biology class, there's just not a whole lot of time. I don't know about you all, but in anything, there's just not a whole lot of time. In any Christian education, any areas, there's not a whole lot of time sometimes to talk about issues. And in this case, we had more time because the English class afforded us that time, where they have for naturally talking and writing. Okay, next slide. There are some excellent supplements out there. If you are going to take on teaching this at all, to any kind of group at all, I have some great recommendations for you. If you're going to carry it to a group of people, one of the best things that you can do, and I've got this on the last page of your outline, video discovery. This is a very expensive, bioethics forum is fairly expensive, but well done. They have video vignettes where they go through different types of ethical situations, and it's very well dramatized, and the students can look at those vignettes and then make their own decisions about how they feel and work through those decisions. Plus, it gives you a lot of other data on that video disc as well. That's very, very helpful. They're coming out with genetics, fundamentals, and frontiers as well, which will also have that type of thing. Students sometimes respond very well, or anybody, a group responds very well to a case that's portrayed in a dramatic way. And then they need to think, because they see that story, and then they've got to really think about the implications of it, and it's very helpful. I would recommend videos as well. Next one. One of the best resources that you can get after for your own use would be to get on the World Wide Web. And here we have a picture of, you can't hardly see it, but there's students there that are working on computers, and it is an excellent way for students to begin looking at all the possibilities of what's out there. And in the area of genetics, the World Wide Web is rich. I've given you a web page of resources so that if you're interested in getting on these places, you can. If you do the next slide up here, maybe you'll recognize this home page. Anybody hit this home page before? Here's the home page for the bioethics. Obviously, the center here for bioethics and human dignity. And I think that this one is not so hot on genetics, but since we're here, I thought maybe you might want to see it. There's a number of other resources, though. How many people have been on the web? You've been out hunting on the web already? Cool. So you probably already really pretty much know this. I gave you some websites anyway that you maybe have not visited yet, so you might want to go and pursue those and take a look at them. I think that if you too want a web exercise, I highly recommend taking your students into a computer lab and getting them on the web. I have a very simple exercise included in your handout on how to get students who don't even know how to use the computer at all in using the web. So if you need that, that's in that handout as well, so that you can maybe use that for yourselves. Here's a couple of websites, though. I wanted to put them down. If you go to the next one there. Here's the Human Genome Program, obviously. Great website to go to with a number of links that are very, very helpful. Next one is Genetic and Public Issues. This is NCGR, and it is a great place to go. This is where current legislation, I mean the very ones that are being proposed right now, are accessible at this website. It's a great webpage. I like this one a lot. Next slide. On the genetics, metagenetics, there's Genethics with great links on that one. That's the University of Chicago right here. Next slide shows Discovery Channel Online. I love this one because right after my students do this lab, then they get to go and see this on the web, and it's like really cool. You know, they really like that. But here's another interesting website. Next one is, these are really rich resources. I highly recommend if you could just take any group or run these off, you can go and just download these. Diving into the gene pool offers you case studies, really great ethical scenarios where you're going to have a really tough time working through them. The next one is the Center for Bioethics. This is University of Pennsylvania. Art Kaplan's the head out there. They've got online electronic discussions. If you hit any website, please go there and get online and put forth your discussions, because people are making, they're having this type of discussions one with another, and I can't tell you that many times these things don't have a Christian lean to them. Get in there and type what you think is right about this, because these are people dialoguing across the world about these issues on the web, so it's very important. The next one is really, really good. I love this one. This one is the London Museum, Science Museum. You can go here and you can actually vote for what you think. It's really cool. They give you a bunch of opportunities. I make my students go there. I say, hey, you guys are going to have to vote, and your vote will show up as to what you think about whether or not an insurance company should get genetic information. What do you think? About a genetic counselor giving out information about paternity that she just discovered unrelated to running the genetic test. And so there are a number of different questions about disclosure, genetic information, how should this be used, and this is a great website for voting. Go and vote heavy so we can load it up on one side. You'll be interested to see what's there. Okay, next slide. Okay, that's the actual voting that you can do there. Next slide. Here's a student on computer online. I want to give you one of the most interesting things that we tried in the classroom. I wish that there's a way to do this in a Christian forum. We go to a computer lab. We have a program called Daedalus. It's a software package where it allows you sort of to do an online chat. And I found, first of all, I had students complaining because they couldn't type their comments fast enough. It's just like, why can't we just like dialogue in the classroom? Well, it's because everybody knows that anytime you have a classroom environment, you always have people that do not enter into discussion. Why? They'll think I'm stupid. They'll think I can't articulate myself very well on the spot. And so you don't have people entering into discussion. Daedalus provides this way of students typing in what they're thinking and then sending a message to everybody else's computer so that everybody else can comment on that. And believe me, you get into some dynamite discussions. Plus, it's recorded, so you can run it off later and talk about it again with all the students. It's a marvelous program that the English department uses at our college, and I highly recommend it. As a matter of fact, I thought it to be so important that I included in your handout an online discussion of students as they debated about genetic therapies. Now, this is a secular institution, and these are students raising these comments themselves with no prior knowledge at all. In fact, one student on it says, I don't know what genetic therapy is. I'm not sure how to even answer. Dr. Newsome, could you help me out a little bit here? It's great, because then it really opens them up for wanting to know what it is because of all the ethical implications. So that's a great program to use as well. Okay, next slide. There's a number of other places that you can go. If you are an instructor, if you are a medical professional, there are a number of arenas that you can go into. I was lucky enough to lecture to Phi Theta Kappa group, that's our honor society, and they let me lecture on genetics. It was so cool. But the coolest part was my college president was right there. And so as I was lecturing, he was like fascinated with this stuff, and it just happened to be Community College Month, so I got taken to the Chamber of Commerce of 2 different locales, huge numbers of, I was talking to 200 at one group. Then I talked to a Rotary Club as well. Now, some of their comments are in this handout. You'll be discouraged to see some of their comments after the session, but it was a great opportunity, and they were very eager to have people present. So I would highly recommend that you pursue Chamber of Commerce, Rotary Clubs. These are the leaders of the community. I lecture to the mayor. So these are the leaders in the community, and they need to hear this stuff and hear this debate. CE, community education, if you're involved in that, offer genetics component in that area. College honor societies, Christian clubs, theater, can't recommend it anymore. Do dramatic vignettes, if you can find them, that offer up the dilemma of what's going on, and do them in a very, very short 15-minute, 20-minute vignette, and then have people discuss it and dialogue about it. I'm working with our theater department on that right now. Adult and youth church groups. Let me warn you about adult and youth church groups. Do you know what kind of attendance you'll have? Guess. Has anybody tried this? Offer to talk at their church? Have low attendance, I'm afraid. You're going to have to offer a hot topic like something funny about jeans or something like that. That's about, spell it like blue jeans. That's about the best you can do sometimes to get people to draw in. Church conferences are another possibility. Unfortunately, though, if you'll notice on the next slide, often your presentation may go like this. I love Miss Peach. This is really kind of scary, though. Let me holler this out to you. Here she is standing on the podium. It says, Biology Club meets here, and she's saying, and so it is our genes that determine what kind of people we are. What does that sound like? Did you hear this earlier, discussed this morning? Anyway, this is what she's saying. And of course, what do the students respond on the other side over there? He says, I'm designer, and the other one says, I'm stonewashed, which was perfect. Perfect comment to that comment made earlier. But this is what generally happens: is genes just don't make much sense to them, and they need to have a simplified level of understanding, and it's really important. As a matter of fact, though, while we're talking about oversimplification, I want to just say something real quick to you. This next picture is a great one. This is my chromosome puffs. I borrowed this, by the way, out of a tremendous amount of media that I got from Human Genome Research. You can get this stuff from them. They have a bunch of cool stuff for free that you can order. You can talk to Francis Collins about that. No, just kidding. Okay, next slide is a key to basic genetics. I'm glad he's not here. A key to basic genetics. And if you see here, this is generally what I do in my biology classroom. We go through exactly what genetic information is all about. Did you see that line today? You know what you offer in your biology classroom. How many of you all have to sometimes speed through your genetics units faster than you want to? I know I do. And when you speed through the unit, what ends up happening is this. You oversimplify. And I remember about 2 years into my teaching, I all of a sudden realized that I was teaching, as a Christian, biological reductionism. I was teaching it. Why? Because I was in a hurry. And it was just like this. Well, DNA, and then you've got RNA, and the transcription translation process gives you a gene. Gives you a trait. So a gene codes for this over here, a trait. Well, we say a protein, but we'd always try to make it to where we made it sound like it was a trait. And this ended up being like this. And again, when the discussion today went around who is teaching this and where are people getting this information, it's in the high schools, and it's in the first year, I promise you, of university or community college environment, because we do it very quickly, and we try to get the information out to them very quickly. So these students commonly, in fact, my students think it's so easy. They're just like, oh, genetics is so easy. It's just great. I understand it all. And everything's Mendelian. Everything's one gene, and it gets just a little scary. As a matter of fact, the next slide shows you this is all the genetic code, and frequently students just end up thinking that we're just kind of A, G's, C's, and T's, and that's what it's all about. And it gets a little scary. And when I realized after 2 years of teaching that I was doing this, I pulled out of it and began telling my students, please understand that it's not this simple. It's not this simple, and let's talk about what it means to say that genes are us. And it's an important thing, but I would say if you are going to lecture on this, always make sure that your audience understands that we are not simply a product of our genes, that there's many other things that play into that as well. So make sure that you do that. The next one shows you an interesting, I'm going to speed through these last ones. I know you may have questions. I want to talk quickly about, too, this was a cool thing that we did with the English professor. We took popular readings, and if you're interested in genetics, now you're probably going to go pick up some books that are written, and it's very popular today to do almost like Discover Channel type stuff, or PBS. David Suzuki's a good example of The Secrets of the Cell. If you read any of their books, do you ever notice how the figurative language, I've learned that because I taught with an English instructor, it's metaphorical is what it is, and you can see that what we have, fighting you again, isn't it? Yeah, if you go back to it. If you see, though, what we have on there is and probably you can't see it too well, but what we have there is a figurative language exercise. And what this is a cut from a specific book. And let me give you what it says on there. You won't be able to see it up here. It says, DNA's power is global. DNA's power is global. DNA has orchestrated the history of life. You may find this in a common biology text, and indeed I did find this in a common biology text every now and then. But orchestrated life, does that suggest to you, or DNA's power is global? And what we did for the students was we had them pick out exactly what kind of figurative language that was, so that they could identify it. We created an exercise for them so they could highlight it in Word. It was pretty cool, to where they could identify the figurative language. Why is that important? Why is that important? If you think that DNA is something more than it is, and typically that's what we give to students, and they read it in the media, it can be potentially dangerous. So we wanted them to identify that as figurative language. Plus it was an English exercise as well. The next one is on media analysis. Here's what we were talking about earlier. Dr. Anderson did this well. How about, you've seen all these genes? I mean, here's the headlines right here, and this is what the students are reading. My students bring these things into me all the time. They go, don't you know the blah blah gene has just been discovered? And that means that, whatever, we can go ahead and have a gene test for it. They just don't logically think. So we do critical analysis with the students of looking at what these things mean. I mean, I can't tell you how important this is. When you see things like tracking down a cancer gene, to that student that means all cancers now have been, the gene for cancers has been elucidated. How about the aging gene? Does that mean you'll never grow old? How about, you're not going to believe this, the bedwetting gene, the fitness gene, which I obviously don't have, so I don't have to exercise, right? I like that one. I think that's really great. You can just take all of these things and put them all together. The personality gene, what does that tell a student? You know, it's like genes are us, and this is the end of the topic. So I think that critical analysis is very, very important. Next of all, I want to show you very quickly that I did have a, this is the thing I promised in my talk, so I want to make sure that I have this. I used the story of Jacob and Laban as a story of recessive genes, and it's really a lot of fun. I'm not going to get into it here, but it's Genesis 30. You have it in your outline. It's a great way in a secular classroom or a Christian classroom to show that, well, genetics aren't directly in the Bible, but a story about genetics and recessive genes are indeed in that particular chapter. It's a lot of fun. And I've got the Larry Gonick book if you want to use the cartoon version in there as well. Okay, finally I want to end with the how important it is when you're giving a talk to be wide open, to be prepared. The next slide is showing you how important it is to be prepared. Next one after that, this is the cartoon version here. Here's some books. There's books out there on the table. There's many, many books out there written to get you prepared about genetics in general. The next slide shows you, I think, this is a scripture verse, and when talking about maintaining value neutrality, I can't tell you how important it is to remain open. When you are giving this information to students or to Christian ed people, anybody that you're giving this information to, any group, you need to remain open so that they can dialogue with you, because they've already got preconceived notions about what they think is right and wrong. And if they can't get those out on the table and they don't feel like the environment is safe, there's a problem. But then you can dialogue with them after that, and I think that's real important. So next slide, I like this one. Go on to the next one after this. Isn't this one great? I just love this one. So we're not going to consult Madame Rosa anymore. Well, that's Miss Tina over there, Reader Advisor. We can just go to Madame Rosa, the geneticist. And this is what we talk about a little bit in the classroom. And you can see some of the comments there that I have in the outline. I don't know if any of them disturbed you or not. Some of them, oh man, some of the stuff I get in the classroom is incredible about what students say and what they think about certain things. But there's some common comments that I've gotten from students, from civic community leaders, from different people. I even had people coming to my session asking me if I knew the cure for X, if that, name the disease, whatever had been discovered as of late. That's sometimes a danger when you bill yourself as talking about genetics. I would say I'm only going to talk about the ethical issues. They wanted to know whether or not the latest cure for X. I had people coming to my session wanting a cure. It's incredible, this desperate need. So you'll have a number of different people who come forth and ask you questions. But I can guarantee you from a Christian basis, and that's what you're getting at this conference, is a way to say and challenge what they say. Like, for instance, this first one, parents should have access to genetic information so that they can decide about whether or not they want to carry a pregnancy to term. I have a student that really ramrodded me on that, and I said, you're being very fair. I think that's a very just thing to want to do, to respect that person. But let me carry you a little bit further. How far do you want to carry that? And she said, okay. And I said, if a woman has 4 girls, she comes into you, you're the genetic counselor, and she doesn't want another girl and she's pregnant. How far can we go with that? It's okay. How far? And boy, to that student, that was wrong. That was wrong that she wanted that genetic information in order to abort that child, because simply on gender. And that's the great question, is how far can you go? So that's what I would recommend, is that you challenge the student to see how far they'll go and discuss that with them, and of course their whole definition of what it means to be a parent. We heard last night too, I was amazed by the mother who said the hemophiliac had gone on to have a child. And in some cases, all of us think what is right and wrong for people to do, whether or not they should have children or not with these genetic disorders, and pass them on. Those are other important things I think we need to discuss with students as well. I've got just a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions? I've got a couple more things to say, but I want to, if there's any, I've been just yakking away up here. Any questions at all that I could address at all? Any questions? Be brave. Be brave. I can ask you. What would you say? Let me just raise this last one. I really had a guy say, he was a prominent member of the community that said this very last comment on there, and I want you to see that on the handout. He said, what is this dark side of DNA knowledge? What is this dark side of DNA knowledge? Maybe I didn't get it. I went through the whole thing and I tried to give the pros and the cons to the whole situation. And he said, I don't understand. Why are you saying that this is a dark side of DNA knowledge? And I said, well, we can potentially discriminate. I gave him a couple of case scenarios. He said, I still don't see a problem with that. I'm sorry, but people can't contribute to society. They just don't need to be here. And I looked over at my college president, because I wanted to go slam him. I looked over at my college president. I knew I couldn't. He was a supporter of the college, and I couldn't afford to do that. And I had to very carefully look at him and say, You know, I think that it just hasn't been discovered yet. All of us have bad genes. We're just not sure which ones. Perhaps they haven't been discovered yet. But I think it's important to know that there, but for the grace of God, go I. There's no way to know what your genetic history is. And just right now, we've got a few diseases picked out and laying out, but, you know, not all discoveries have been made yet. So it's an important thing to debate about with other people, but that is a prevailing thought among people. And it's scary. Discrimination is still alive and well, and this will just give people another way to discriminate. So it's important to dialogue about that discussion, but to open up the forum and then say, what do you think? What do you think? So we can get it out on the table and other people can dialogue. I've had insurance people in the group as well, and they really resent that I say that the, insurance companies maybe shouldn't get a hold of this data, and they bring something else to the table as well. So there's a lot of different things that you can do when you bring this all together. I highly encourage to see if you can offer it in your church. I think we're responsible to go back to our churches and to give this message to the churches, and I hope that you will want to do that and talk to your parishioners about what all of this means, because it's really, really important data for them to begin thinking about, and certainly, hopefully, coming to a vote. So, any questions at all? Anybody think of another one? No?